The security guard's rough hands ripped my phone right out of my trembling fingers, and honey, I couldn't believe what was happening to me right there in the lobby of Sunny Meadows Assisted Living in Phoenix, Arizona. My own daughter Linda had called them on me, her own mother, telling them I was becoming a problem and needed to be controlled. Y'all, I'm telling you, at 72 years old, after raising 4 children and working 43 years as a school cafeteria lady, I never thought my own flesh and blood would treat me like some kind of criminal just for wanting to call my sister in Michigan. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," that guard said, his voice cold as ice water, while I stood there in my best Sunday dress, the blue one with tiny flowers that my late husband Earl bought me for our golden anniversary. My hands were shaking something fierce, and I could feel all those other residents staring at me like I was some kind of spectacle. The humiliation was burning through my chest like acid, sweetie, because here I was, Dorothy Mae Henderson, being treated like a child who couldn't be trusted with her own phone. But let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started, because, honey, what happened next is going to absolutely shock you to your core. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been living peacefully in my little 2-bedroom house on Cactus Road, the same house where Earl and I raised our babies, where we celebrated every Christmas and birthday for 37 years. I was managing just fine, thank you very much, still driving my 2015 Honda Civic to Walmart every Tuesday, still making my famous apple pie for the church bake sale, still tending to my rose garden that Earl planted for me back in 1987. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I remember because it was exactly 3 days after my 72nd birthday, and I was still feeling pretty good about reaching another milestone. The Arizona sun was streaming through my kitchen window, hitting the yellow curtains that Linda had helped me pick out 5 years ago when she still pretended to care about my happiness. I was sitting at my little breakfast table, sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one that says "World's Greatest Mom," that my youngest Tommy gave me when he was still in elementary school. Y'all, before I tell you what Manda discovered that morning, and honey, this is where everything started falling apart like a house of cards. If you're loving this story so far, smash that subscribe button and hit that bell notification. You know I get so excited when I see y'all in the comments. Speaking of which, what state are you calling home right now? Drop it down below. And sweetie, tell me, have you ever had family turn on you when you needed them most? Because your stories help me know I'm not alone in this crazy world. Now, let me tell you what I found in my mailbox that day, because what Linda did next was about to change my entire life. That morning, I walked out to get my mail like I had every single day for 37 years. The postman, Jerry, always waved at me from his little truck. Such a sweet young man, probably 40-something, always asking about my arthritis and whether I needed any help with my groceries. But when I opened that white envelope from Wells Fargo, honey, my whole world just tilted sideways. The bank statement showed my savings account, the one with $63,000 that Earl and I had saved penny by penny for 45 years, was down to $837. I had to read those numbers 3 times, sweetie, because my eyes just couldn't process what I was seeing. $837 from $63,000? Where in the Sam Hill had my money gone? My hands started trembling so bad I had to sit down right there on my front porch steps, still wearing my pink housecoat and fuzzy slippers. The Arizona heat was already getting brutal, but I felt cold all over, like someone had dumped ice water in my veins. I stumbled back into my house and called the bank immediately. The customer service lady, bless her heart, explained that there had been regular withdrawals over the past 18 months. Large withdrawals, honey, sometimes $3,000 and $4,000 at a time. Someone with access to my account had been systematically draining everything Earl and I had worked our whole lives to save. My voice was barely a whisper when I asked who had been making the withdrawals. Mrs. Henderson, the withdrawals were made by Linda Patricia Henderson, who was listed as your power of attorney and joint account holder. Those words hit me like a Louisville slugger to the chest, y'all. Linda, my firstborn daughter, the one I stayed up all night with when she had pneumonia at age 6, the one I worked double shifts to pay for her college education, the one who promised me she'd always take care of Mama when I got old. I couldn't even speak for a full minute. The customer service lady kept saying, "Mrs. Henderson, are you still there?" But honey, how do you respond when you discover your own child has been stealing from you for 18 months? How do you wrap your mind around that kind of betrayal? I finally managed to whisper, "Can you tell me what these withdrawals were labeled as?" "They're marked as assisted living expenses and medical care costs, Mrs. Henderson. It appears she's been preparing for your transition to professional care." Professional care, assisted living expenses. Y'all, I was living in my own house, cooking my own meals, driving my own car, managing my own medications perfectly fine. What assisted living expenses? What medical care costs? The only medical care I needed was my monthly blood pressure check with Dr. Martinez, and Medicare covered that completely. That's when it hit me like a freight train, sweetie. Linda had been planning this. For 18 months, she'd been stealing my money and telling people, probably everyone, that I needed professional care, that I couldn't manage on my own anymore. She'd been building a case against me, using my own money to fund whatever scheme she had cooking in that calculating brain of hers. I hung up that phone and just sat there in my kitchen, staring at the wall where Earl's portrait hung, him in his Navy uniform from when we first met. "Oh, Earl," I whispered to his picture, "what would you do if you were here? How could our Linda do this to us?" I could feel those tears starting to sting my eyes, but honey, I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. First, I needed answers. I called Linda immediately. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might jump right out of my chest. When she answered, her voice had that fake, cheerful tone she always used when she was hiding something. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Linda Patricia Henderson," I said, and you could hear the steel in my voice. "I just got my bank statement. Where is my money?" The silence on the other end of that line stretched longer than the Grand Canyon, sweetie. I could practically hear her scrambling for an excuse. "Mom, we talked about this. You've been confused lately, and I've been helping manage your finances while we prepare for your move to Sunny Meadows, remember? The nice assisted living facility we toured last month?" Confused? Confused? Y'all, I may be 72 years old, but my mind is sharper than a tack, and we never toured any assisted living facility. I would have remembered something like that.
"Linda, I never toured any facility with you, and I'm not confused about $62,000 missing from my account." My voice was getting stronger now, honey, because anger was starting to replace the shock. "You've been stealing from me, from your own mother, money that your daddy and I saved for 45 years. Mom, you're getting upset over nothing. Dr. Martinez said you've been having memory issues, and we all agreed this was the best solution for everyone." Memory issues? I called Dr. Martinez monthly, always remembered my appointments, never missed taking my blood pressure medication. What memory issues was she talking about? That's when Linda dropped the bomb that changed everything, y'all. "Mom, you signed the papers giving me power of attorney 6 months ago. You don't remember, but you did. And you also signed the application for Sunny Meadows. Your room is ready whenever you are." My blood ran cold, sweetie, because I absolutely, positively never signed any such papers, ever. "Linda, I want to see those papers right now. Bring them over here immediately." But she had an excuse ready, didn't she? "Mom, they're at the lawyer's office. I can't just drive over there on a whim. Besides, you need to start packing. The move-in date is next Tuesday." Next Tuesday? 5 days away? My hands were shaking with pure rage now, honey. I am not moving anywhere, Linda Henderson. This is my house, Earl's house, and I want my money back, every penny. But she just laughed, this cold, calculating laugh that I'd never heard from my daughter before. Mom, the money's gone. It's been spent on your care. And whether you remember signing those papers or not, they're legal. I'm trying to help you. Help me? By stealing from me and forcing me out of my home? That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop to my toes, y'all. Linda had been planning this for a long time. This wasn't some sudden decision. This was a calculated, methodical plan to take control of my life and my money. After I hung up, I sat in Earl's old recliner and tried to think clearly. If Linda had somehow forged my signature on legal documents, I needed proof. I needed to see those papers, and I needed someone trustworthy to help me figure out what my rights were. That's when I remembered my sister Joyce in Michigan. Joyce was 2 years older than me, sharp as a whip, and had worked for a law firm for 30 years before retiring. If anyone would know what to do, it was Joyce. I picked up my phone to call her, and honey, that's when I realized something terrifying. I couldn't remember Joyce's phone number, not because I was confused or having memory issues, but because I'd relied on my cell phone's contact list for so many years that I never bothered to memorize it. And Linda, clever, scheming Linda, she knew that. She knew if she could control my access to my phone, she could control who I talked to. But Joyce wasn't my only lifeline, sweetie. I still had my landline, that old rotary phone that Earl insisted on keeping in the kitchen. I called information and got Joyce's number, my heart pounding with each ring. When she answered, her familiar voice was like a warm hug through the phone lines. "Dorothy, honey, I was just thinking about you. How are things in the desert?" Joyce's cheerful voice immediately made me feel less alone. But when I started explaining what Linda had done, what she was trying to do, her tone changed completely. "Dorothy, listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. And do not let them move you anywhere until I get there. I'm catching the first flight to Phoenix tomorrow morning." Joyce was always the fighter in our family, y'all. When we were kids and bullets picked on me at school, Joyce would march right up to them and set them straight. Now, at 74, she was ready to fight for me again. "But Joyce, she says she already has legal papers, power of attorney. What if it's too late?" My voice was cracking with worry, honey, because I felt so helpless and confused about legal matters. Earl had always handled that stuff. "Dorothy May Henderson, let me tell you something. I've seen plenty of elder abuse cases in my 30 years at that law firm. If Linda forged your signature, that's fraud. If she's been stealing your money, that's theft. And if she's trying to force you into assisted living against your will, that's kidnapping. None of this is legal, baby sister. None of it." Joyce's words were like a lifeline, sweetie. Finally, someone was telling me I wasn't crazy, I wasn't confused, and I had rights. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump, thinking Linda might show up with some kind of official people to force me out of my house. I kept checking that my doors were locked, and I moved Earl's old baseball bat next to my bed. At 72, I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, Joyce's flight was supposed to land at 10:47 a.m. at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. I planned to pick her up in my Honda and bring her straight to the house so we could figure out our next move. But at 8:15 a.m., while I was still in my robe drinking coffee, Linda showed up at my front door with 2 men I'd never seen before. "Mom, we need to talk," Linda said through the screen door. She was wearing her business suit, the navy blue one she wore when she was trying to look official and important. The 2 men were wearing uniforms that said Sunny Meadows Assisted Living on them. My heart started racing, honey, because I knew this wasn't a friendly visit. Linda, I told you yesterday I'm not going anywhere. Joyce is flying in from Michigan and we're going to get to the bottom of this. But she just smiled that cold smile and held up some official-looking papers. Mom, these are the legal documents. You signed them 6 months ago, even if you don't remember. And Dr. Martinez has declared you mentally incompetent to make your own decisions. These gentlemen are here to help you pack and transport you to your new room. Mentally incompetent? Dr. Martinez would never say such a thing. He'd been my doctor for 8 years, and he knew I was sharp as a tack. I want to call Dr. Martinez myself right now. But she shook her head. Mom, it's all been arranged. Your room is ready, and they're expecting you. The longer you delay this, the harder it's going to be on everyone. That's when one of the men stepped forward, and his voice was all business. Ma'am, we understand this is difficult, but we have a legal obligation to transport you today. You can come willingly, or we can involve additional authorities. Either way, you're coming with us. Y'all, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. These strangers were in my house telling me I had to leave my home based on papers I never signed and a doctor's evaluation that never happened. I ran to my bedroom and grabbed my cell phone, determined to call Dr. Martinez and clear this up immediately. But Linda was faster than me, sweetie. She followed me into my bedroom and held out my hand. Mom, give me the phone. You're getting agitated, and that's not good for your condition. Condition? What condition? I was agitated because my daughter was trying to kidnap me. Linda, I am calling Dr. Martinez right now to straighten this out. But when I tried to dial, she grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Just trust me. I'm trying to help you. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do in a million years, honey. I looked my firstborn daughter straight in the eyes and said, Linda Henderson, you are stealing from me, lying to me, and trying to force me out of my home. I don't trust you, and I want you to leave right now. The hurt that flashed across her face almost made me feel guilty for about 2 seconds. But then she composed herself and turned to the 2 men. Gentlemen, as you can see, my mother is having one of her episodes. Dr. Martinez warned us this might happen. Can you please help her gather her essentials while I pack some clothes? Episodes. Y'all, I was madder get a wet hen. These people were talking about me like I wasn't even there. Like I was some kind of mental patient who couldn't understand what was happening. I marched right up to that man and said, Sir, I am Dorothy Henderson. I am 72 years old. I have lived in this house for 37 years, and I am not having any kind of episode. My daughter is trying to steal my money and force me out of my home against my will. But he just looked at Linda with this knowing expression, like he'd seen this all before. Ma'am, family transitions are always difficult, but we're trained professionals, and we're going to take excellent care of you at Sunny Meadows. You're going to love your new room. That's when I realized they weren't going to listen to me no matter what I said, sweetie. In their minds, I was just a confused old lady having a tantrum. Linda had already painted the picture for them. Poor, struggling daughter trying to help her demented mother who doesn't understand what's best for her. My word meant nothing compared to those official-looking papers Linda was waving around. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed my landline phone, desperate to call Joyce and tell her what was happening. But Linda was right behind me, and honey, she actually unplugged that phone from the wall. Mom, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Just let us help you. I want to call my sister Joyce. She's flying in from Michigan this morning to help me. But Linda shook her head sadly, like I was talking nonsense. Mom, Joyce can visit you at Sunny Meadows anytime she wants.
But right now, we need to go." That's when the full reality hit me, y'all. These people weren't going to let me make any phone calls. They weren't going to let me contact anyone who might help me. They were going to physically remove me from my home, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop them. I was 72 years old, alone, and completely at their mercy. I tried one more time to reason with Linda. "Honey, please, just let me call Dr. Martinez. If he really said I'm mentally incompetent, I want to hear it from him directly. What harm could that possibly do?" But she had an answer ready for that too, didn't she? "Mom, Dr. Martinez is out of the country at a medical conference. He won't be back for 2 weeks. That's why we had to move forward with this today." Out of the country? Dr. Martinez never mentioned any medical conference when I saw him last month. Something about that felt wrong, but I couldn't prove it. The two men were getting impatient, honey. One of them looked at his watch and said, "Ma'am, we have a schedule to keep. Other residents are waiting for us. We need to leave in the next 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's all I had left in the house where I had lived for 37 years, where I'd raised my children, celebrated anniversaries with Earl, hosted countless family dinners and Christmas mornings. How do you say goodbye to an entire lifetime in 10 minutes? Can I at least pack my own clothes?" I asked, hoping to buy some time to think of a plan. Linda nodded, but she followed me to the bedroom like she was afraid I might try to escape through a window. As I pulled dresses and sweaters out of my closet, my mind was racing. Joyce's flight would be landing in less than 3 hours. If I could just stall them somehow or get word to Joyce about what was happening. But they weren't giving me any chances, sweetie. Linda packed my toiletries while one man loaded my suitcase into their van and the other one stood guard in the hallway. I felt like a prisoner being transferred from one jail to another. When I tried to grab my address book, the little blue one where I kept all my important phone numbers, Linda gently took it from my hands. "Mom, you won't need this at Sunny Meadows. They have their own contact system, and all your important calls will go through the front desk." Through the front desk, meaning every phone call I made or received would be monitored and controlled. Just like Linda had controlled my bank account, now she was going to control my communications too. As they walked me out to that van, I took one last look at my house. The roses Earl planted were blooming beautifully, pink and yellow and deep red, just like they had every spring for 30 years. My little Honda was sitting in the driveway, and I realized I probably wouldn't be allowed to drive anymore either. Everything I'd worked for, everything that defined who I was being stripped away piece by piece. The ride to Sunny Meadows took about 25 minutes. And during that entire drive, I kept thinking about Joyce landing at the airport. She'd take a taxi to my house, find it empty, and have no idea what had happened to me. Linda had thought of everything, hadn't she? She timed it perfectly to happen while my only ally was 30,000 feet in the air, unable to help me. Sunny Meadows looked nice enough from the outside, I'll give it that. It was a sprawling, single-story building with desert landscaping and a big sign that said, "Where family matters most." The irony of that motto wasn't lost on me, honey. Here I was, being forced into this place by the family member who was supposed to matter most, and she'd been stealing from me for 18 months. When we walked into the lobby, that's when I saw her. The intake coordinator, a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled gray hair and a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be Dorothy Henderson. We've been expecting you. I'm Margaret Williams, and I'm going to help you get settled in your new home." New home. Not temporary arrangement, not trial period. Home. Like I was never expected to leave this place. Margaret shook Linda's hand and thanked her for choosing Sunny Meadows for her mother's care. They talked about me like I wasn't even standing there right there, discussing my needs and my adjustment period and my medication management. That's when I spoke up, honey. "Excuse me, Margaret, but I need to make a phone call. My sister is flying in from Michigan today, and she's going to be worried when she can't find me at home." Margaret smiled that professional smile and nodded sympathetically. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson, we encourage family contact. But first, let's get you settled in your room, and then we can discuss the facility's communication policies." Communication policies. Already they were putting barriers between me and the world outside. Linda handed Margaret a manila folder thick with papers. "Here's everything you'll need: Mom's medical history, her power of attorney documentation, Dr. Martinez's evaluation, and her medication list." Dr. Martinez's evaluation? The one that supposedly declared me mentally incompetent? I wanted to see that evaluation, but when I reached for the folder, Margaret politely redirected my attention to a different topic. "Mrs. Henderson, let's focus on getting you comfortable first. Would you like to see your room?" But I wouldn't given up that easily, sweetie. "Mrs. Henderson, we'll review all your medical information with our staff physician tomorrow during your intake assessment. Today is just about settling in and getting familiar with your new environment." Tomorrow. There was always a tomorrow when it came to getting answers, wasn't there? Always another delay, another excuse, another reason why I couldn't see the documents that had supposedly signed away my freedom. My room was nice enough, I suppose. It had a twin bed with a blue comforter, a small dresser, a recliner chair, and a window that looked out onto a courtyard where other residents were sitting in wheelchairs. The walls were painted a soft yellow, probably chosen by some interior designer to be cheerful and uplifting. But all I could think about was my bedroom at home, with Earl's pictures on the nightstand and the quilt my mother made for our wedding covering our big double bed. "Mom, look how nice this is," Linda said, opening the small closet where they'd already hung the clothes from my suitcase. "You have your own bathroom, and there's a call button right here if you need help with anything." "Help with what? I've been taking care of myself just fine for the past 8 years since Earl died. I didn't need help using the bathroom or getting dressed or taking my medications." That's when Margaret mentioned something that made my blood run cold, y'all. "Mrs. Henderson, dinner is served in the main dining room at 5:30 p.m. sharp. After dinner, we have mandatory evening medications distributed at 7 p.m., and then quiet time begins at 8:30 p.m. "Mandatory evening medications? I only took blood pressure medication in the morning. What evening medications were they talking about?" "What evening medications?" I asked, but Margaret was already moving on to the next topic: the weekly activities schedule, the visiting hours, the laundry service. When I pressed the issue, Linda stepped in with another lie. "Mom, Dr. Martinez prescribed some new medications to help with your anxiety and sleep issues. Remember, we discussed this at your last appointment." "We absolutely did not discuss any such thing, honey. I never had anxiety or sleep issues in my entire life. Earl used to joke that I could sleep through a tornado." That's when I realized what they were planning to do to me, sweetie. They were going to medicate me, probably with something that would make me drowsy and compliant, something that would support their story that I was mentally declining and needed full-time care. They were going to drug me into submission. "I want to see Dr. Martinez immediately," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I want to discuss these new medications with him personally." But Margaret had another professional response ready. "Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Martinez is currently unavailable, but our facility physician, Dr. Roberts, will be conducting your intake assessment tomorrow morning. He'll review all your medications at that time. Unavailable, just like Linda has said. How convenient that my doctor of 8 years was suddenly unreachable just when I needed him most. I was starting to see the pattern, honey. Every person who might help me, every resource I might use to fight this was suddenly unavailable or out of reach. Linda stayed for about an hour, helping me arrange my few belongings in the small dresser and talking about how wonderful this was going to be for me. Mom, you'll make so many friends here, and the activities look really engaging. Look, they have bingo on Wednesdays and a book club on Fridays. Bingo and book clubs, like I was supposed to be grateful for trading my independence for supervised recreational activities. When Linda finally got ready to leave, that's when the full reality of my situation hit me like a freight train. I was going to be alone in this place, surrounded by strangers, with no way to contact the outside world, and no idea when or if I'd ever see my home again. The tears I've been holding back all day finally started spilling over. Linda, please don't leave me here. Please let me come home with you tonight, and we can figure this out together tomorrow. I was begging my own daughter, y'all, begging her not to abandon me in this place. But she just hugged me and said those words that still echo in my head. Mom, this is what's best for everyone. You'll understand eventually. Best for everyone, not best for me. Best for Linda, who now had complete control of what was left of my money and didn't have to worry about her difficult mother interfering with her plans. Best for the assisted living facility, who now had another paying resident. Best for everyone except Dorothy Henderson, who just wanted to stay in her own house and live out her remaining years in peace. After Linda left, Margaret gave me what she called orientation materials, basically a handbook of rules and regulations for my new life. Visiting hours were limited to 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekends. All incoming phone calls went through the main switchboard and were limited to 15 minutes. Outgoing calls required approval from the nursing staff and were monitored for resident safety. Resident safety. That was their euphemism for complete control, honey. They were going to monitor my phone calls to make sure I didn't say anything that contradicted their story about my mental incompetence, and they were going to limit my contact with the outside world so nobody would hear my side of what really happened. That first night, I lay in that unfamiliar bed listening to sounds I'd never heard before. Call bells ringing, nursing staff talking in the hallways, other residents crying out in their sleep. The pillow smelled like industrial laundry detergent instead of the lavender fabric softener I used for 30 years. Everything felt wrong, foreign, like I was in some kind of prison disguised as health care. Around 2 a.m., I finally gave up on trying to sleep and sat in the recliner chair looking out on the courtyard lit by security lights. That's when I started planning, sweetie. If Linda thought she could just dump me here and steal my life, she had another thing coming. I might be 72 years old, but I wasn't dead yet, and I damn sure wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning at 6 a.m. sharp, a young nursing aide knocked on my door with a breakfast tray and a small paper cup filled with pills. 3 pills, to be exact, 2 white ones and 1 light blue one. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. Time for breakfast and your morning medications." I looked at those pills suspiciously. What are these for? The aide, whose name tag said Jennifer, smiled brightly. "Oh, I don't know the specifics, honey. The nurse will be around later to go over everything with you, but Dr. Roberts ordered them specifically for you." Dr. Roberts, the facility physician I'd never met who was making decisions about medicating me based on an evaluation I'd never had from a doctor who was conveniently out of the country. I'm not taking any medications until I speak with Dr. Roberts personally. But Jennifer's smile never wavered. Mrs. Henderson, facility policy requires that all residents take their prescribed medications. If you refuse, I'll have to note that in your chart and notify the nursing supervisor. Noted in my chart. Create a paper trail showing that I was non-compliant and difficult, further supporting their story that I needed to be controlled. I stared at those pills for a long time, honey. I could take them and risk being drugged into compliance, or I could refuse and risk being labeled as problematic. Either way, they had me trapped. So I did something they probably didn't expect. I pretended to take them. I put all 3 pills in my mouth with the water, but I didn't swallow them. As soon as Jennifer left, I spit them into a tissue and hid them in my bathrobe pocket. Breakfast was typical institutional food: scrambled eggs that tasted like rubber, toast that was somehow both burnt and soggy, and orange juice that came from a powder. But I ate every bite because I needed my strength for what I was planning to do. Around 9 a.m., a woman in scrubs knocked on my door and introduced herself as Betty, the activities coordinator. Mrs. Henderson, we have craft time starting in 10 minutes in the recreation room. Would you like to join us? We're making tissue paper flowers today. Tissue paper flowers. At 72, after working for 43 years and raising 4 children, I was being offered the chance to make tissue paper flowers. The condescension was breathtaking, sweetie. But I smiled and said yes, because I needed to scout the facility and figure out how to get access to a phone. The recreation room was filled with about 15 residents, mostly women, sitting at tables covered with plastic tablecloths. Some of them looked alert and engaged, but others seemed heavily medicated, staring blankly into space or nodding off in their chairs. That's when I met Evelyn Kowalski, and honey, she changed everything. Evelyn was 81, sharp as a tack, and madder than hell about being stuck in Sunny Meadows against her will. She was sitting at the corner table, completely ignoring the tissue paper and glue. And when I sat down next to her, she leaned over and whispered, "Don't eat the vegetables at dinner. They put something in them to make us sleepy." "What do you mean?" I whispered back, pretending to arrange some pink tissue paper. Evelyn glanced around to make sure Betty wasn't listening, then said, "My son put me here 3 months ago. Same story as you probably. Said I couldn't take care of myself anymore, forged some papers, stole my money. But I've been watching, honey. They drug the food to keep us compliant, the vegetables especially." I felt the chill run down my spine, y'all. If Evelyn was right, then Linda hadn't just stolen my money and my freedom. She delivered me to a place that was systematically drugging residents to keep them docile. "How do you know this?" I asked, still pretending to work on the craft. Evelyn said, her voice barely audible, "I used to be a pharmacist before I retired. 38 years filling prescriptions. I know what pharmaceutical drugs smell and taste like. And that green bean casserole they serve twice a week, it reeks of sedatives." She paused to glue a piece of yellow tissue paper, then added, "Plus, I've been palming my evening medications and hiding them instead of swallowing them. I'm the only resident here who doesn't fall asleep during the 8:30 news." This was exactly the ally I needed, honey. Someone who understood what was really happening here and had the knowledge to help me fight back. "Evelyn, I need to make a phone call. My sister's supposed to be in Phoenix looking for me, but they won't let me use the phone without supervision." Evelyn's eyes lit up with the first real smile I had seen from any resident. "Sweetie, there's a payphone in the lobby of the medical building next door. It's technically part of the hospital campus, so Sunny Meadows can't control access to it. But you have to time it right. The shift change is at 3 p.m. and there's about a 15-minute window when security's distracted." A payphone. I hadn't used one in probably 20 years, but desperate times call for desperate measures. How do I get there without being seen? Evelyn pretended to examine her tissue paper flower while she explained the layout. There's a side door near the laundry room that leads to a garden path. Follow that path past the maintenance shed and you'll see the back entrance to the medical building. The payphone is right inside the main lobby. But Dorothy, you need quarters. Do you have any quarters? I shook my head. I hadn't carried cash in years. Everything was credit cards and debit cards. But Evelyn was one step ahead of me. I've been saving quarters from the vending machine purchases my grandson makes when he visits. I've got about $8 worth hidden in my room. That should be enough for several long-distance calls. This woman was a godsend, y'all. Finally, someone who understood what was really happening here and had the knowledge to help me fight back. During lunch, which I barely touched because of Evelyn's warning about drug food, I kept thinking about Joyce. She had to be frantic by now. She'd probably gone to my house, found it empty, maybe talked to neighbors who saw me being taken away in that van. If I knew Joyce, she's already calling police and hospitals trying to track me down. At 2:45 p.m., Evelyn created the perfect distraction. She accidentally knocked over a pitcher of water in the main dining room, causing a big commotion that drew all the staff's attention. While they were mopping up the mess and calming down the other residents, I slipped out through that side door she told me about. The Arizona heat hit me like a wall, honey. It had to be over 100 degrees, and I was wearing a cardigan because the air conditioning inside Sunny Meadows was set to Arctic. But I didn't care. For the first time in 24 hours, I was outside breathing free air, walking under the open sky. Even if it was just for a minute or two, I felt human again. The garden path was longer than I expected, winding through desert landscaping and past a small pond where a few ducks were swimming. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. But then I remembered why I was sneaking around like a criminal, because my own daughter had stolen my life and dumped me in this place like unwanted furniture. The medical building was busy, thank goodness. Doctors and nurses walking in and out, families visiting patients, enough activity that one old lady heading to the payphone wouldn't attract attention. When I saw that payphone hanging on the wall near the information desk, my heart started pounding with hope for the first time since this nightmare began. I called information first and got Joyce's number again, then fed quarters into that old payphone like my life depended on it. Which in a way it did. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and I was starting to panic that she wouldn't answer. But on the 4th ring, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, my sister's voice. Hello? She sounded stressed and worried, which told me she'd already discovered I was missing. Joyce! Oh, thank God, it's Dorothy! I was trying to keep my voice down, but the relief was overwhelming, sweetie. Finally, I had contact with someone who cared about me, someone who would believe my story. Dorothy, where the hell are you? I went to your house and it's empty. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, said she saw men loading you into a van yesterday. I've been calling hospitals and police departments all morning. Joyce was talking fast, the way she always did when she was angry and scared. Joyce, listen to me carefully. Linda had me kidnapped and forced into an assisted living facility called Sunny Meadows. She's stolen $62,000 from my bank account and forged legal documents saying I'm mentally incompetent. I need your help. I was talking as fast as I could, knowing my quarters wouldn't last long, and knowing someone might notice I was missing at any moment. Jesus Christ, Dorothy. Okay, I'm writing this down. Sunny Meadows. Where exactly is it located? I gave her the address I'd memorized from the intake paperwork. I'm coming to get you right now. Don't sign anything. Don't take any medications. Don't trust anyone there until I arrive. Joyce, they're medicating the food here, and they monitor all phone calls through the facility. This payphone is the only way I can talk freely. I was running out of quarters fast, honey. The electronic voice was already warning me to deposit more coins. Dorothy, I'm going to call that lawyer I used to work for, Tom Davidson. He specializes in elder abuse cases now. We're going to get you out of there and nail Linda's ass to the wall for theft and fraud. Can you get back to this payphone tomorrow at the same time? I'll try. Joyce, I'm scared. They're trying to make me look crazy so they can keep me here permanently. My voice was starting to crack, y'all, because saying it out loud made it feel even more real and terrifying. Baby sister, you listen to me. You are not crazy. You are the victim of a crime. And I'm going to fix this. I promise you, we're going to fix this. The line went dead as my quarters ran out, but Joyce's words kept echoing in my head. You are not crazy. You are the victim of a crime. Getting back to Sunny Meadows without being caught was easier than I'd expected. The water cleanup was still happening, and most of the staff was busy preparing for the 3 p.m. shift change. I slipped back through that side door and made it to my room without anyone noticing I'd been gone. But about 30 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Mrs. Henderson, this is Nurse Patricia. I need to check your vital signs and discuss your medication compliance. Patricia was a large woman in her 40s with kind eyes, but a non-nonsense manner. When she took my blood pressure, she frowned at the reading. Your blood pressure is quite elevated, Mrs. Henderson. 170 over 95. Have you been taking your morning medications as prescribed? I looked her innocently and lied through my teeth. Yes, I took them with breakfast, just like Jennifer told me to. Well, sometimes it takes a few days for new medications to regulate properly. Dr. Roberts wants to see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for your full intake assessment. Make sure you take your evening medications tonight. They'll help you sleep better. Evening medications. The ones that would probably knock me unconscious until morning. That afternoon, I spent time with Evelyn in the recreation room, learning more about the facility's routines and which staff members to trust. According to Evelyn, most of the nursing aides were decent people, just doing their jobs, but the administrative staff and some of the senior nurses were part of what she called the system. Dorothy, they make money off residents like us, she explained while we pretended to work on a jigsaw puzzle. The longer they keep us here, the more they collect from Medicare and our families. And if they can prove we're mentally declining, they can justify keeping us indefinitely. It was a horrifying thought, honey, that my own confusion and distress could be used as evidence that I belonged here. At dinner, I followed Evelyn's advice and avoided the green beans and mashed potatoes, sticking to the plain chicken breast and dinner roll. Even so, I felt unusually drowsy afterward, which made me realize they were probably putting sedatives in multiple food items to make sure residents couldn't avoid them entirely. When the evening medication cart came around at 7 p.m., I was ready. The nurse this time, named Carol, handed me the same 3 pills I'd received that morning, plus 2 additional ones. Dr. Roberts added some sleep aids to help you adjust to your new environment, Mrs. Henderson. 5 pills now. They were definitely trying to drug me into submission, y'all. I did the same trick as before, pretended to swallow them, then spit them into a tissue as soon as Carol left. But 5 pills were harder to hide than 3, and I was running out of creative places to stash them in my small room. That night, while most of the other residents were fast asleep from their medications, I lay awake planning my strategy for the meeting with Dr. Roberts. I needed to appear cooperative enough that they wouldn't increase my security restrictions, but alert enough to ask the right questions about my so-called medical evaluation. Around 11 p.m., I heard something that made my blood run cold, sweetie. Crying. Soft, heartbroken crying coming from the room next to mine. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall, and I could hear a woman's voice saying, "Please, I just want to go home. Please let me call my son. I don't understand why he won't come get me." That could have been me, honey. If I hadn't met Evelyn, if Joyce wasn't already looking for me, I could have been the one crying myself to sleep, begging strangers to let me contact my family. The thought made me more determined than ever to fight this system and expose what they were doing to vulnerable elderly people. The next morning, Dr. Roberts turned out to be a thin man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. His office was designed to look warm and professional, with diplomas on the walls and a photo of what I assumed was his family on his desk. But when he started asking me questions, I realized he'd already made up his mind about my mental state. "Mrs. Henderson, your daughter Linda has expressed some concerns about your ability to live independently. Can you tell me about any memory problems you've been experiencing?" Memory problems? I've been managing my own household, finances, and medical care perfectly fine until Linda decided to steal from me. "Doctor, I haven't been experiencing any memory problems. I remember my address, my phone number, my social security number, my children's birthdays, and every detail of what Linda has done to me over the past week." I rattled off facts and dates to prove my mental clarity, but he just nodded and made notes, like everything I said confirmed his preconceptions. Sometimes patients with early dementia don't recognize their own symptoms, Mrs. Henderson. Your daughter mentioned that you've been forgetting appointments, neglecting household maintenance, and becoming increasingly paranoid about money matters. Paranoid about money matters? I caught my daughter stealing $62,000 from me. "Dr. Roberts, I'd like to see the evaluation that Dr. Martinez supposedly wrote declaring me mentally incompetent. And I'd also like to call Dr. Martinez directly to discuss these alleged symptoms." But he had an answer ready for that, too, didn't he? "Mrs. Henderson, patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing Dr. Martinez's evaluation with you directly. And as I understand it, Dr. Martinez is currently out of the country. But based on my observations and your family's reports, I'm comfortable continuing your current medication regimen and recommending that you remain at Sunny Meadows for extended care." Extended care, not temporary, not until I proved my competency. Extended, possibly permanent. They were planning to keep me here for the rest of my life, drugged and docile and cut off from anyone who might question their story. "Dr. Roberts, I want to see those legal documents Linda claims I signed. I want copies of everything in my file, and I want to speak with a lawyer." His expression didn't change, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. I was being too difficult, asking too many questions, not accepting their narrative.
Mrs. Henderson, that kind of agitation and suspicion is actually consistent with your diagnosis. Many patients with cognitive decline become fixated on conspiracy theories about their families and caregivers. I'm going to recommend increasing your evening medications to help with anxiety. Increasing my medications? Because asking questions and defending myself was evidence of mental illness? I left that meeting knowing I was in serious trouble, y'all. Every normal reaction I had to being kidnapped and drugged was being twisted into proof that I needed to be kidnapped and drugged. It was a perfect circular trap, and they'd probably used it on hundreds of other elderly people who ended up dying in places like this, forgotten by families who found it convenient to believe they were too sick to care for themselves. At 2:45 p.m., I made my way back to the payphone, using the same route and the same distraction technique with Evelyn's help. This time, I was prepared with a notebook where I'd written down all the important details Joyce would need. Dr. Roberts' name, the medications they were trying to give me, the names of staff members who seemed to be part of the conspiracy.
Joyce answered on the first ring this time. Dorothy, thank God. I've been worried sick. How are you holding up? Her voice was the only thing keeping me sane at this point, sweetie. Joyce, they're trying to drug me into submission. 5 different medications now, plus sedatives in the food. And the doctor here claims I'm paranoid and delusional for asking questions about the legal documents. I was talking fast again, conscious of the quarters disappearing. Dorothy, I've got good news. Tom Davidson reviewed what you told me yesterday, and he says you have strong grounds for both criminal and civil action. Linda can't just forge power of attorney documents. That's felony fraud. And forcing you into assisted living against your will is false imprisonment. False imprisonment. Finally, someone was using legal terms that matched what I was experiencing. But Joyce, how do we prove the documents are forged? Linda has them, and everyone here believes they're real. This was my biggest fear, that Linda had been so clever in her planning that there would be no way to prove what she had done. That's the beautiful part, honey. Tom called Dr. Martinez's office yesterday. Dr. Martinez is not out of the country. He's been seeing patients all week, and he has no record of ever declaring you mentally incompetent. In fact, his notes from your last visit show you were in excellent mental health. Dr. Martinez wasn't out of the country? Linda had lied about that just like she had lied about everything else. Oh my God, Joyce. So Dr. Martinez never wrote an evaluation? I was almost shouting into the phone, honey, because this was the proof we needed that Linda had fabricated the whole story. Not only did he never write an evaluation, Dorothy, but he's willing to testify that you've shown no signs of cognitive decline in the 8 years he's been your doctor. Tom is filing emergency papers with the court tomorrow morning to have you released and to freeze all your bank accounts until we can investigate the theft. Emergency papers. Court action. Finally, someone was taking my situation seriously. But Joyce, what if they increase my medications before you can get me out? What if they make me so drugged I can't think clearly during legal proceedings? This was my biggest fear now, that they'd escalate the drugging to prevent me from being a credible witness to my own kidnapping. Dorothy, listen to me very carefully. Tom says the key is documentation. You need to hide those pills you've been palming and keep detailed notes about everything they're doing to you. If we can prove they were medicating you against your will with drugs you didn't need, that's another felony charge. Documentation, evidence, building a case that would not only free me, but punish everyone who had participated in this nightmare. How much longer do you think it will take? I was running low on quarters again, and I could hear the electronic voice getting ready to cut us off. Tom thinks we can have you out within 72 hours if Dr. Martinez's testimony holds up in court. Can you survive 3 more days without taking their medications? 3 more days. I could do anything for 3 more days if it meant getting my life back. Joyce, I love you. You're saving my life. The words came out between tears, honey, because I was so grateful to have someone fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Joyce, I love you too. And baby sister, we're not just going to get you out of there. We're going to make sure Linda and everyone who helped her pays for what they've done to you. The line went dead, but this time I felt hope instead of despair. Help was coming. Justice was coming. I just had to survive 3 more days. But surviving 3 more days turned out to be harder than I expected, y'all. That evening, when Carol came around with the medication cart, she brought a supervisor with her, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Grant, who introduced herself as the director of nursing. Mrs. Henderson, It's come to our attention that you've been asking a lot of questions about your medications and your legal status here. Dr. Roberts is concerned that you're becoming increasingly agitated and paranoid. I have a right to know what medications I'm being given and why, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. But Mrs. Grant just smiled that cold, professional smile I was getting used to. Mrs. Henderson, part of your condition involves a lack of insight into your own medical needs. That's why your daughter made the difficult decision to place you in professional care. Now we need you to take your medications without further resistance. Lack of insight, another clinical term to explain away my perfectly rational objections to being drugged. This time, they didn't just hand me the pills and leave, honey. Carol stood there with her arms crossed while Mrs. Grant watched me put each pill in my mouth and swallow water. Then Mrs. Grant actually asked me to open my mouth and lip my tongue to prove I'd swallowed them. I had no choice but to actually take those 5 pills, y'all. Within 30 minutes, I felt like I was moving through thick fog. My thoughts became sluggish, my speech slurred, and I could barely keep my eyes open. This is what they'd been trying to do to me all along, turn me into one of those vacant-eyed residents who sat in wheelchairs staring at nothing. The next morning, I could barely function. Jennifer had to help me get dressed, and I couldn't remember why that felt wrong or what I was supposed to be fighting against. The medications had wiped out my short-term memory and made everything feel dreamlike and unimportant. If Joyce called the payphone at our scheduled time, I wouldn't even remember to go meet her. But Evelyn saved me again, honey. Around lunchtime, when I was sitting in the dining room blankly staring at my untouched food, she sat down next to me and whispered, "Dorothy, your sister is coming for you tomorrow. You told me yesterday. You have to fight through the drugs and remember, your sister is coming for you tomorrow." Those words cut through the pharmaceutical fog like a knife, bringing back fragments of memory. Joyce, the payphone, Dr. Martinez, emergency court papers. I had to stay alert somehow, had to remember what was at stake. "Evelyn," I whispered back, my words coming out thick and slow. "They made me take the pills last night. I can't think straight." She nodded grimly and handed me her cup of black coffee.
"Drink this, honey. All of it. Caffeine helps counteract some of the sedatives. And don't eat anything else today except plain crackers and water. We need to flush as much of that poison out of your system as possible." Evelyn's pharmaceutical knowledge was my lifeline, sweetie. Without her guidance, I would have been completely at their mercy. That afternoon, I managed to make it to the payphone, though I felt like I was walking through quicksand. Joyce's voice was sharp with alarm when she heard how slurred my speech was. "Dorothy, what did they do to you? You sound like you're drunk." I tried to explain about being forced to take the medications, but the words kept getting jumbled up in my mouth. Joyce, they made me last night. Can't think." It was frustrating and terrifying to feel my own mind working so slowly, honey. This was what Linda had been planning all along, to drug me until I really did seem mentally incompetent. "Dorothy, listen to me. Tom is filing the emergency papers first thing tomorrow morning. Dr. Martinez is going to meet us at the courthouse with his medical records proving you're mentally competent. Can you hold on for 18 more hours? 18 more hours? That seemed like an eternity when every minute felt like swimming through molasses. Joyce, if they drug me again tonight, might not remember. I was terrified that another dose of those medications would completely wipe out my ability to advocate for myself during legal proceedings. Dorothy, I'm driving over there tonight. I'm going to sit in the parking lot until morning, and if anyone tries to hurt you, I'm calling 911. You are not going through this alone anymore. My sister was going to spend the night in a parking lot to protect me. At 74 years old, Joyce was prepared to camp out in her rental car to make sure I survived until the lawyers could rescue me. The knowledge that Joyce was nearby gave me strength I didn't know I still had, y'all. When the evening medication cart came around, I tried a different approach. Instead of refusing outright, I asked to speak with Dr. Roberts about reducing my dosage. The medications are making me very drowsy. I'm having trouble staying awake during the day, and I think the dosage might be too high. It was a reasonable request from someone trying to be compliant while advocating for herself. But Carol just shook her head. Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Roberts specifically increased your dosage because of your agitation yesterday. These medications are prescribed for your own safety and the safety of other residents. For my own safety, because asking questions about illegal imprisonment was apparently dangerous behavior. Once again, they supervised me taking every single pill, and once again, I felt my mind dissolving into chemical fog within the hour. But this time, I had Evelyn's coffee trick, and I had the knowledge that Joyce was sitting in the parking lot, and I had hope that tomorrow would bring rescue. I didn't sleep at all that night, honey. The medications made my body feel heavy and sluggish, but my mind was fighting against them, cycling between periods of confusion and moments of crystal clarity when I remembered exactly what was at stake. During those clear moments, I reviewed everything I needed to tell the lawyers: the forged documents, the stolen money, the forced drugging, the lies about Dr. Martinez. Around 6 a.m., I heard unusual activity in the hallways, voices I didn't recognize, footsteps moving with purpose instead of the usual casual pace of staff beginning their shifts. My heart started pounding despite the sedatives because I knew something important was happening. At exactly 8:30 a.m., there was a knock on my door that sounded different from the gentle taps of nursing staff. This was an official knock, firm and authoritative. When the door opened, I saw Joyce standing there with 2 men in suits and a woman carrying a briefcase. "Dorothy, oh honey, look what they've done to you." Joyce rushed to my side and took my hands, and I could see tears in her eyes when she saw how drugged and disoriented I was. But behind her, one of the men was already talking to Mrs. Grant, who had appeared with several other administrative staff members. "I'm Tom Davidson, representing Dorothy Henderson. This is a court order for her immediate release and a temporary restraining order preventing any further administration of medications without her explicit consent." He handed Mrs. Grant a stack of official papers, while the other man introduced himself as a sheriff's deputy there to ensure compliance with the court order. Mrs. Grant was reading the papers with a shocked expression, honey. Clearly, she'd never expected anyone to challenge their authority or question their methods. "Mr. Davidson, Mrs. Henderson is here under proper legal guardianship. Her daughter has full power of attorney and medical decision-making authority." "Actually, she doesn't," said the woman with the briefcase, who turned out to be another lawyer. "Those power of attorney documents were forged. We have handwriting analysis and testimony from Dr. Martinez proving that Dorothy Henderson never signed those papers and was never declared mentally incompetent." Forged. The word hung in the air like a bomb going off, y'all. Everything Linda had done, every document she'd used to justify stealing my money and my freedom, was fake, criminal, illegal. "Furthermore," Tom continued, "we're filing criminal charges against Linda Henderson for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. And we'll be investigating this facility's role in unlawfully detaining Mrs. Henderson and medicating her against her will." Criminal charges. Finally, someone was treating this like the crime it was. It took about 2 hours to complete all the paperwork and gather my belongings, but by 11 a.m., I was walking out of Sunny Meadows as a free woman, honey. The Arizona sun felt like a blessing on my face, honey, and breathing air that wasn't filtered through institutional ventilation systems was like tasting freedom itself. Joyce drove me straight to Dr. Martinez's office where he examined me and documented the effects of the unauthorized medications. Mrs. Henderson, you've been given a combination of antipsychotics and sedatives that you absolutely did not need, he told me, his voice angry on my behalf. These drugs could have caused serious health problems, especially at your age. Dr. Martinez also provided a written statement confirming that I had never shown any signs of mental decline and that he had never declared me incompetent or recommended assisted living. His medical records going back 8 years showed consistent notations about my mental acuity and independence. From there, we went to the bank, where Tom had already initiated proceedings to freeze my accounts and trace the stolen funds. The bank manager, a nervous man in his 30s, explained that Linda had been making regular, large withdrawals using power of attorney documents that they now realized were fraudulent. "Can you recover the money?" I asked, though part of me was afraid to hope for too much. $62,000 was everything Earl and I had saved, every penny we'd managed to put aside from 45 years of hard work. "Mrs. Henderson, we've already identified most of the withdrawn funds. Much of it went into Linda's personal accounts, and some was used to pay for the assisted living facility in advance. We should be able to recover the majority of your savings." Recover the majority, not everything, but enough to restore some financial security.
That afternoon, we went to the police station to file formal criminal charges against Linda. Detective Sarah Williams, a woman in her 40s who specialized in elder abuse cases, listened to my story with growing outrage. "Mrs. Henderson, what happened to you is unfortunately more common than most people realize, but you're lucky. Many victims don't have family members like Joyce who fight for them." She was right, honey. If Joyce hadn't flown out from Michigan, if she hadn't found that lawyer, if she hadn't refused to believe Linda's lies, I could have spent the rest of my life drugged and imprisoned in that place. The detective explained that they would be arresting Linda within 24 hours on charges of fraud, theft, forgery, and elder abuse. "We'll also be investigating Sunny Meadows for their role in this conspiracy. Detaining someone against their will and medicating them without proper medical justification is serious criminal behavior." 2 days later, I was back in my own house on Cactus Road, sitting in Earl's recliner and drinking coffee from my World's Greatest Mom mug. Joyce had stayed to help me readjust and to make sure Linda couldn't try anything else. But mostly, I just needed time to process what had happened to me. The roses Earl planted were still blooming beautifully in my garden, just like they had every spring for 30 years. My little Honda was still parked in the driveway, waiting for me to take my Tuesday trips to Walmart. Everything looked exactly the same, but I felt fundamentally changed by what I'd experienced. Linda was arrested at her office on a Thursday morning, handcuffed, and walked out in front of all her colleagues. According to the detective, she initially tried to maintain that she'd been acting in my best interests, but when faced with evidence of the forged documents and stolen money, she broke down and confessed to everything. During the investigation, we discovered that Linda had been planning this scheme for over 2 years, honey. She'd been telling people I was declining mentally, setting up the narrative that would justify her eventual actions. She'd even convinced my other kids, Tommy, Sarah, and Michael, that I was becoming a burden and that assisted living was the best solution for everyone. When my other kids learned the truth, they were horrified. Tommy flew in from Oregon to apologize in person, tears streaming down his face as he hugged me. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Linda showed us bank statements and medical records, and we thought you were getting sick and just didn't realize it. Sarah called from North Carolina, sobbing over the phone. Mama, I should have known something was wrong. You never sounded confused when we talked, but Linda kept insisting you were good at hiding your symptoms. Michael drove up from Tucson with his whole family, including my grandchildren who had been told I was too sick to see them. It took months for the legal proceedings to conclude, but in the end, justice was served hotter than a Thanksgiving turkey, y'all. Linda was sentenced to 5 years in prison for elder abuse, fraud, and theft. Sunny Meadows lost their license and was shut down after investigators found evidence they'd been systematically drugging residents to keep them compliant. Dr. Roberts had his medical license revoked. I recovered $58,000 of my $62,000, and the bank waived all fees and penalties as part of their settlement for accepting fraudulent documents. It wasn't everything Earl and I had saved, but it was enough to restore my financial security and independence. More importantly, honey, I got my life back. I'm still living in my house on Cactus Road, still driving my Honda to Walmart every Tuesday, still tending to Earl's roses. But now I also volunteer with the local elder abuse prevention program, sharing my story with other families to help them recognize the warning signs. Joyce moved to Phoenix permanently to be closer to me, and we have coffee together every morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Evelyn was also rescued from Sunny Meadows when the investigation expanded, and she's become one of my closest friends. We meet for lunch every Wednesday and joke about being the 2 old ladies who brought down an entire criminal conspiracy. The most beautiful part of this whole nightmare, honey, is that it brought my real family closer together. Tommy, Sarah, and Michael now call me every week instead of every few months. My grandchildren visit regularly, and we've established new traditions to make up for the time Linda's lives stole from us. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking I'm back in that small room at Sunny Meadows. But then I see Earl's picture on my nightstand and smell the lavender fabric softener on my pillowcase. And I remember that I'm home. I'm free. I'm surrounded by people who actually care about my well-being instead of just my bank account. And when I think about Linda sitting in that prison cell, probably wondering how her perfect plan fell apart, I can't help but smile, y'all. She underestimated 3 things that proved to be her downfall: the power of a sister's love, the importance of keeping detailed medical records, and the determination of a 72-year-old woman who wasn't ready to give up her independence without a fight. You see, honey, they snatched my phone from my hands that day because they thought they could control who I talked to and what story I told. But they forgot that the truth has a way of finding its own path, and justice has a way of catching up to people who prey on the vulnerable. Linda wanted to silence me, but instead she gave me the most important story of my life to tell. So if you're out there listening and you're worried about an elderly family member, please don't just take someone else's word about their mental competency. Visit them yourself. Talk to their doctors directly. Ask to see legal documents before you believe claims about power of attorney. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct and investigate further. Because somewhere out there might be another Dorothy Henderson sitting in a facility against her will, medicated into compliance, waiting for someone to care enough to ask the right questions and fight for the truth. Don't let that person be someone you love, and don't let anyone convince you that being old means being helpless. Thank you for listening to my story, sweetie. And remember, no matter how old you are, no matter how vulnerable you feel, you still have rights, you still have dignity, and you still have the power to fight back when someone tries to take those things away from you. Sometimes the most important phone call you'll ever make is the one where you refuse to stay silent about injustice.